Hi everyone. Today topic introduction of genetics. What do you mean by genetics? Genetics is nothing but that it is the branch of biology. It studied heredity and variation occurs generation after generation. It's called as the genetics. What do you mean by heredity and what do you mean by variation? Heredity is nothing but that those characters are similar, transfer from one generation to another generation. We call as the hereditary. And what do you mean by variation? Variation is nothing but that those are the character different from generation after generation. We call as the variation. What it is nothing but the genetics. Genetics is very important part is that heredity and variation. We know about the heredity means what and what is meant by variation. Heredity means similar character. Variation means different character will be transferred. Example, we know that the doggy baby, we call it the puppy, having the similar characters. They having the similar character, but they are looking something variation or variation will be occur in the parents and offspring. Means is nothing but that genetics. Likewise, we are also take our example. We know that our parents look similar. We are looking similar to our parents. Means some characters are similar and some characters are varied. Means we having the genetics. Means it is nothing but that the genetics. It is very simple. Genetics means heredity and variation. Now, very important point is that after that, what do you mean by science? It is the branch of biology, or we call it is what do you mean by science? You know that everyone known about that science. If suppose we are student of the science, we know what do you mean by science. Science is nothing but that it is a testable knowledge. We call it science is nothing but the knowledge. And what do you mean by knowledge? Knowledge how it will be occur with the help of testable explanation and some prediction about the universe of the we call it the science. It's very simple. Science is information, or we call it the knowledge, and it will be testable or it will be predictable of the universe. We call it the science. It's very simple. Science. Before that, these genetics will be emerged from natural histories also. But here, what happened at the time of anciently? That time what happened? Lamarckism. You know that about the evolutionary studies. In that evolutionary study, first we call it the Lamarck's theory, then we call it the Darwin theory, likewise Dewey's theory. Lot of theories will be occur. In that first theory, we call it the Lamarckism theory. What is the Lamarckism theory? What Lamarckism? Lamarckism is nothing but that here what happened, those are the character acquired. It will be transferred to next generation. It will be this Lamarckism theory will be formed in 1809. That time Lamarckism will be studied on that evolutionary study. That time what happened, acquired character will be transferred from one generation to another generation. Means we call it the inheritance will be take place here also. Means Lamarckism is also telling about or told about that inheritance, but it will be acquired character will be inheritance. Means in their life of that animals or organism, it will be acquired their character in whole life, and this acquired character will be transferred into the next generation. Means we call it the Lamarckism theory, or we call it the Lamarck use and disuse of a lot of the having their features. But very important point, how genetics will be emerged from the natural history. First important point is that the Lamarckism means acquired characters, inheritance. The main point here. After that, Charles Darwin will also study the evolutionary study. It is having evolutionary studies. That time what happened, observation will be take place. In that observation, he got lot of things in their observation, and he have got these characters or these animals will be formed from the pre-existing animals. Those are the animals having their own characters. These characters will be transferred from one generation to another generation. Means inheritance of the character from the parents. He also told by the Darwin, and it will be this type of the Darwin told in 1859. After that, Mendel's After that, Mendel's work. We know that everyone knows that genetics means Mendel, because the Mendel is the father of genetics. Why we call it the father of genetics? Because he lot of work will be take place. Mostly the Pisum sativum plant. He work on the Pisum sativum plant, and plant hybridization will be take place. And after that plant hybridization, some mathematical equations or experiment will be done by the Mendel. He don't know about the genetics, but he studied plant hybridization. At the time of plant hybridization, he got some good results. Mendel work. Why Mendel work or Mendel will be succeed? Because of that they select 7 characters, and these 7 characters are present in that Pisum sativum plant. For that purpose, the Mendel will be succeed, and after succeeding this Mendel, they are known about these genes. The Mendel is told only some factor is responsible for inheritance from one generation to another generation. He coined a term as a factor, but nowadays we call it that gene. But before that time, what happened? The Mendel is coined term as a factor. After that, what happened? He also, this factor is responsible for inheritance from one generation to another generation. He also coined some terms like dominant and recessive. What do you mean by dominant? Dominant is nothing but that those are the character expressed in next generation. That type of character we call it the dominant character. And those are the recessive character. This recessive character is nothing but that those are the characters suppressed in next generation by the dominant character. That time we call it the recessive one. These two terms is coined by the Mendel. And after Mendel work is in between the 1856 to 1865. In that period, the Mendel experiment on the plant hybridization will be done. After that, what happened? No one be interfere or no one be interested to work on the Mendel work. After that, die of the Mendel. In 1901, Hugo de Varey's theory, or we call it the evolutionary theory, at that time he rediscovered and re-researched on that Mendel work. After the die of that Mendel, then he worked on that Mendel work or experiment, and then he will be explain the mutation theory. After that, lot of scientists work on the Mendel work. And that time he know the Mendel work is very good and very vast. And another important scientist we call the William Batson, and this William Batson in 1905 he coined a term genetics. After the rediscovering of the Mendel's work, he coined a term we call it the genetics by the Williams Batson. After that, what happened? After some scientist is working on that genetics, after the coin as a genetics, after that some scientist is working on that, and after that known as that this genetic material is present in that organism or in that individual, and these chromosome having the DNA and protein. This protein and DNA which is important, responsible, either chromosome or DNA, which is responsible for the inheritance. Again it will be discovered. Up to 1905 they don't know which is who is responsible for the inheritance, either DNA or protein. After that, what happened? Another different scientist is working on that. Example, Griffith experiment. We know that Griffith experiment. This Griffith experiment is told that if something is present in the genetic material, this genetic material will be transformation into the next bacteria. That time we know that something genetic material will be present in that organism. These genetic material will be transferred from one generation, or transformation will be take place. This study will be taken place by the Griffith experiment, or we call it the Griffith experiment. We know that everyone know that the Griffith experiment means transformation will be take place, means something is responsible for heredited, either it is a chromosome, and this chromosome is consist of the mostly two important part. One is the protein, another one is the DNA. These are the very important part present in that chromosome. Who is responsible? Either chromosome, either protein or DNA is responsible for the inheritance. And we know that genetics is very important part is that inheritance means from one generation to another generation. What do you mean by inheritance? Inheritance is nothing but that those are the character transfer from one generation to the next generation. We call it the inheritance, and this inheritance will be occur because of the chromosome. And in that chromosome, this chromosome having two parts. One is the protein, another the DNA. Either protein responsible for the inheritance or responsible of DNA. It will be important point. Next, another scientist will be work on that chromosome. After 16 years, different scientists work, such as in 1944, Avery-Macleod-McCarty, his work, he observed that this DNA is responsible for the transformation. After Griffith is telling experiment as a transformation. Genetic material will be transformation. Okay. Now this in 1944, Avery-Macleod-McCarty is telling about his work is done by, and he observed or he conclude that this DNA molecules or DNA is transformation. This molecule will be responsible for the transformation in that genetic material. After that, what happened? Hammerling in 1943, he worked on the single cell algal cell. In that algal cell, he work as a this genetic material is present in that nucleus in that eukaryotic cells. Means Hammerling in 1943 is work on the algal cell, single cell algal cell. In that, what happened? He observed or he conclude that its nucleus is having a genetic material. Means in that nucleus something genetic material will be present, and in that genetic material we call it the chromosome is present. In that chromosome this protein and DNA will be present, and here this nucleus of that eukaryotic cell having the genetic information. It is about the work is done by the Hammerling. After that, what happened? Hershey and Chase. These are the two scientists work in the 1952, and he exactly conclude that after their work, he conclude that mostly this DNA is responsible for inheritance from one generation to another generation. Up to the 1952, he exactly we known about that what is inheritance will be take place. Here conclude that his work is that the DNA is inherited from one generation to another generation. After that, DNA will be studied. Different scientists like Watson and Crick, the structure of DNA will be studied. Then after what happened, different scientists will be work on the different aspects. Nowadays, till today, from 1805 to till today, the work in the genetics will be continuously progress. Likewise, here we are studying in your syllabus, this genetics will be introduced only for the study. Now, very important part that what we mean by gene. We know that what we mean by gene. Gene is nothing but that. It is a single fragment of the DNA. It is nothing but the single fragment of DNA, and this it is not only the single fragment of DNA, because we know that single fragment is not a gene. Gene is nothing but a single fragment of DNA, but it expresses a specific type of character. We call it the gene. This is nothing but the gene, and we know that the genes or the DNA is present in the chromosome, or it is we call it the genetic material, and this genetic material is present in that nucleus. They all will be studied in various scientists in different eras. Now we having this type of the syllabus in our BSc second year. Now very important point is that what happened Some concept is very important in the genetics. First important, what do you mean by genetics, what do you mean by gene, what do you mean by dominant, what do you mean by a recessive gene. Now we will see the exact definition of the gene. Gene is nothing but it is a single fragment of DNA. It expresses a specific type of character we call as the gene. Then another some terms we will be studying in our in general introduction. Another important is known that the Mendel's having some concepts like homozygous, heterozygous. What do you mean by homozygous? What do you mean by heterozygous? Homozygous is nothing but that similar alleles will be present in a particular gene of a particular gene. We call it the homozygous. What do you mean by alleles? Alleles is nothing but that it is the alternative forms of that gene. What do you mean by alleles? It is very simple. Alternative forms of that gene. We know that in our the alternative form is they having the different their aspects, or we call it the different in their aspect or their expression or their characters. We call it the alternative forms. Like we know that in our God, we know that God, Vishnu, they are having the different types of the avatars. Likewise, here they different avatar. We know that avatar means nothing but the alleles. Different types of the alleles are present here also. Means avatar Ram, Krishna. These are nothing but the alternative forms of that God. Similarly here, a specific type of the gene, they having the alternative forms. Means we call that these alternative forms. We call that the alleles. Here, what happened? We are telling about. We are understand about that. What do you mean by homozygous and what do you mean by heterozygous? Homozygous means what happened? Homozygous is nothing but that the alternate similar alleles of a particular gene. We call that the homozygous. What do you mean by heterozygous? Heterozygous is nothing but that different alleles of a particular gene. We call that the heterozygous. These are the very important difference between these. If suppose we want to study the genetics, we know about some concepts or basic concept about the genetics, such as the definition of the genetics, then gene, homozygous, heterozygous, dominancy, recessive gene means what, dominant gene means what. Dominant, we already told that. What do you mean by dominancy, what do you mean by recessive. Now we will see the what do you mean by back cross and test cross. These are the difference between the back cross and test cross. This back cross is nothing but that those are offspring of the parent. Offspring will be cross with the parent. Means we call it the back cross. And these back cross are two types. One is the dominant back cross, another one is the recessive type of the back cross. These are the two types of the crosses. Back cross is nothing but that means offspring will be cross with their parents. Either it is a of the parents. Either it is a dominant back cross or recessive back cross. What do you mean by back cross? Dominant back cross and recessive back cross. This recessive back cross is also called as the test cross. Means recessive back cross is also called as the test cross. What do you mean by test cross? This test cross is nothing but that this offspring will be cross with the recessive parent. We call it the test cross, and we also call as the recessive back cross. It is the difference between the back cross and test cross. The back cross means with parents. Either it is a dominant, either it is a recessive. And if suppose it is a recessive back cross, that time we call it the test cross. It is about the general terms in the genetics. Now in your syllabus genetics is present. Now we will see one by one topic. In next lecture we will see Mendel's experiment or Mendel work. Thank you very much, and like and share this channel, my channel. Thank you very much.